And the last thing you want to pay attention to is going from a range where it's not specific to something that's completely task specific. Let's get to it. What's going on, everyone? It's David. This is Smart Fitness, and today we're going to be going over a rationale for why you need to be doing a more specific warm-up for your training program beyond something so simple as a general warm-up where it's just going to be warming up your body. So to start, I've put the times on everything as well as what you would go through and do from what I do with my athletes, as well as myself and my own training. Sean and I are going to be going over demoing everything. So basically, your general body warm-up is something like a treadmill or cycling or some sort of just basic prep that's going to warm up your body. You don't want to go into exercise completely cold for the just in case that you could injure yourself. So as a general rule of thumb, I say about 10 minutes to get yourself warm. The next thing that I generally lead my clients into is range of motion based work where it's from an active perspective. Typically things like a dowel based warm-up like kayaks and internal external rotations. Usually that takes about 2 minutes. From there we go into some sort of like neural-based prep work, something to get their mind ready to go, something like a foam rolling-based task. Maybe like a dead bug or some sort of range of motion-based work where you're using the roller to help with thoracic mobility or general extension. From there I would generally go into some sort of breathing and bracing prep work, again to kind of reinforce the tasks that you're going to go into. So say you're doing a lower body day, something where you're going to be doing some sort of knee and hip extension that forces you to stay braced the same way you would as if you're squatting. Next, we'd go into some sort of stability-based load, starting body weight to see that you're actually able to be stable on a single arm or a single leg, and then go into a loaded-based pattern to reinforce that. The last thing that I want to do is some sort of empty-based specific task movement to what you're going to be doing. So if you're going to be doing bench pressing, obviously benching with an empty bar. It's a great way to get yourself completely ready to go. Make sure that everything's ready to rock. And the last thing you want to pay attention to is going from a range where it's not specific to something that's completely task specific. Let's get to it.
All right, buddy. In this video, we're going to be going over the upper body range of motion active general warm-up. So we're going to have David move through a couple of our dowel warm-ups. So first thing he's going to do is our dowel internal external rotation. So he's going to get into a 90-degree position with the elbows, and then he's going to internally rotate down, so keeping the elbows locked in place as far as he can go without letting the elbows drop, and then he's going to externally rotate all the way back up. Okay? And generally you want to go for between 8 to 10 repetitions with this exercise. Next thing that we're going to be doing is our dowel front raise. So hands just outside shoulder width, and he's going to be going all the way up, keeping the ribs down throughout the entire range of motion, and then going to full extension of the shoulders and then back down. Okay. Next thing he's going to be doing is something called a kayak. So we're going to have him set up wide, and he's going to move through his entire range of motion, back and forth. Okay, performing a few repetitions. Okay, now have you set up on the bench for our thoracic extension. So he's going to get the elbows on the bench. He's going to sink back into the hips, and then he's going to start to flex the arms, and you should feel it along the lats. Okay, and the goal of the stretch is to eventually sink back farther into the hips as you start to loosen up. Okay, we'll have you come up to standing, and then for our final exercise, we're going to be doing our shoulder breaks. So all you're doing is double arm, full rotation around the shoulder joint. And for our final exercise, we're going to be going over dowel internal rotation shoulder breaks. So notice the hand position has changed. He's now got a supine hand position on the dowel as he's moving around the range. Hi everybody, in this video we're going to go over our lower body active general range of motion warm-up. So first we're going to have David set up for a dowel good morning. So we'll have him face that way, or yeah, either way is fine. So he's going to have the dowel in a high bar position, and then he's going to hinge at the hips, okay, moving until he feels a nice stretch in the hamstrings, and then squeezing the glutes back up. Okay, we're going to have him move through a few reps. So notice he's keeping a neutral spine throughout the entire movement. Okay, and then we'll have you face. Yeah. Next thing we're going to work through is our Dowel RDL. So it's almost the exact same as a good morning, except the bar position is in front of the hips. Yeah, so he's going all the way down to the limit of his hamstring mobility, and then he's coming back up, squeezing the glutes all the way through, keeping neutral spine throughout. Next, we're going to have him do an overhead squat. Okay, so he's going to set up, shoulders in full flexion, and then he's going to squat down, keeping full foot contact throughout the entire movement. Yeah. So as you can see, come up to the top, and see right before he initiates the descent, he braces, and then he moves through the range of motion, and now we'll have you set up for an overhead lunge. Okay. Okay, so if you notice, he is moving through an actual lunge and not an overhead split squat. So you are going to step back to that starting position at the beginning of each of the reps. Okay? So you're going to make sure that it is an up and down movement and it's not a forward, letting that heel come up as you move forward. And then finally, because you do get a little bit of upper body work in our lower body program, you will want to move through some kayaks as well.
All right, guys, so from there we're going to go into the general dowel or foam roller warm-up. So with the roller, you're using it as more of an implement to move your body through a range of motion. So the first thing that we're going to start with is a thoracic rotation movement. So Sean's going to get down on all fours, and then from that position he's going to have the roller between one arm, and then as he's rotating, you'll notice that he's actually twisting his entire torso into this to force his lats to lengthen and to get a little bit more of that thoracic mobility. From there, we're going to go into a crossover with an anchor, so he's going to lie on his back. And then from that position, he's going to basically be using the foam roller as an implement for his leg as he crosses over. So this is going to put him into a little bit more of lumbar extension. And then as he's moving, he's going to take one arm and cross it over to reach the other side. And then as he returns back, he's looking to open it as far as he can all the way down at the ground. So he's going from full adduction to abduction. The last upper body based movement that we want to work with is going to be a dowel thoracic extension up against the wall. This is used to help stabilize his scaps. So you'll notice that the moment he got into position there, he pinched his shoulder blades together, and as he's moving up, he's allowing them to fluidly return. So you're just going to rest the foam roller against your forearms and then reach up with the range of motion that you're able to control through your shoulder blades. Okay, next from the upper body dowel or foam roller based work, we're going to be going into lower body foam roller work. So the first thing that we're going to do is basically a cross and return. So Sean's going to be lying back on his back again. And from this position, he's going to aim to have his leg as straight as he can. So there's going to be no bend in his knee. Have that knee straight for me. And then as you cross over, you're using this as an anchor, the foam roller as an anchor to force yourself to get a little bit of a stretch and a little bit of prep work for your glute med and a little bit of rotation-based work. As a simple way to basically prime the lower body, get the hips a little bit more warm for the tasks they're about to do. From there, we're going to go into a quad release. So this one's quite simple. Basically, all you're going to do is just lie down on the foam roller, and then find somewhere where your body's tight, relax into that. But if there's not really an area that's tight, just kind of roll through, get the quads warm for the task that you're about to do. And the last exercise that we're going to do is a hamstring stretch. So on your hamstring stretch, you can go from the ground, but we've found that it's been more advantageous to go off of a bench. So we're going to be demonstrating it off of a bench. What you're going to do is start at the top of your hamstring, so basically the base of your hips. Straighten your leg, and then from that position, you're going to just relax into that roller, find somewhere where it bothers you, and then just kind of sit out into that, teasing into ranges of motion that bother you. Again, using this just as a way to get your body used to the activities that you're about to do. Okay, so from here we're going to go into a breathing and bracing based pattern. So we've got several dead bug variations that are utilized for both the upper and the lower base movement patterns that we do. So we're going to start off with just a simple bodyweight dead bug. So Sean's going to lie down on his back. From that position, he's going to put his knees up at a 90-degree angle within the hips as well. He's going to have his hands pushed against his knees, and then he's going to extend the opposite arm to leg while trying to maintain a flat spine up against the ground and a braced stomach. So you'll see that he's going to extend his right leg, left arm, and then as he returns back, everything stays the same throughout the entire movement pattern. To progress this movement, we have two options that we generally like to work with. One is loading within the hands. So he's going to hold on to the weight. One leg's going to extend and both arms are going to go back. This is going to challenge your ability to maintain a braced position just through an external load being added. Another way that you can go about this is to force on keeping yourself braced from this position, but only extending your legs. And we've got a band. So Sean's going to set up with the band as if he's trying to do a crunch. And then from the same movement pattern from his lower body, he's going to be extending one leg at a time while maintaining tension on the band. So you're gonna go ahead and extend one leg, beauty, and then return back. So as you can see, the hip, ankle, and knee angles do not change, and neither does the dead bug itself, okay? From there, we're gonna go into a bird dog. So both these movements are some sort of anti-rotation, focusing on maintaining your brace while you're moving your lower or upper extremities. So on your bird dog, it's the same type of setup as your dead bug. You're extending the opposite arm to leg, brace, lock everything in, hips stay square, good, and then return back. I'll have you do one more on the opposite leg. And the last progression that you'd want to work with for bracing and breathing would be a fast, slow sequence. So Sean's gonna have his feet elevated. It's not going to look like he's doing any movement, but what he's going to be doing is focusing on breathing as fast as he can into his diaphragm and then as slow as he can into that diaphragm. So I'll have you go ahead and go into the fast breathing. It's going to basically look like he's hyperventilating while he's trying to maintain his brace. And then we'll have him go into a slow breathing pattern where he's taking as deep of breaths as he can, keeps everything locked in place, holds that breath for a couple seconds, releases it, and then restarts the pattern again. And the last, or arguably the most advanced movement and breathing and bracing prep pattern that we typically have our clients do is a bear crawl prep. So we're going to have Sean head over to the wall over there. So for your bear crawl prep, what you're going to do is aim to have the knees as low to the ground as you can. Think of it like you're trying to push as much pressure into your feet or through your feet against the wall, as much pressure as you can in your hands, trying to drive the hands forward. So from that position, he's going to slowly elevate just one toe at a time, or 1 foot at a time rather, up the wall while maintaining his braced position throughout the entire movement pattern itself. If this is too difficult of a variation, isometrically holding it, so just staying in that static position and breathing, going through fast and slow sequences, is a way to work your way up into this movement-based pattern that Sean's doing right now. Okay, so from here we go into a breathing bracing sequence for the lower body. So what we've got that typically consisting of is 90-90 based hip movements. One where you're sitting there holding it and just breathing through the movement pattern, and one where you're using your hips to actually rotate from one side to the other, almost like a windshield. So we'll get Sean to set up for us, and he's going to be doing the 90-90 where he's just holding. Now, if your hip mobility is bad, I'm okay with you applying pressure into your hands, but the objective is to be able to hold yourself upright from that position and then breathe from that pattern. Use your hands if you need to. And then from there, we're going to go into rotation. So you're going to have basically your hands rested at the back, and you would literally just rotate one side to the other as a way to force yourself into internal and external rotation. So we're going to have Sean go ahead and do that. Rest both hands on your back, and then just, or on the ground behind you, and just rotate from one side to the other continuously without actually stopping. From here, we would go into a anti-flexion based movement, which would be a side plank. And our side plank is going to consist of 2 different variations. One is a Copenhagen, working on the adductor stability, and the other one would be an abductor based focus. So we're going to start with the abductor based focus. So Sean's going to set up doing a side plank, and then he's going to keep his leg in the same position, but he's going to raise through his hips and straight back down. So it's going to challenge him and his ability to maintain glute stability as well as bracing. From here, we're going to go into a Copenhagen plank off the bench. So Copenhagen is going to challenge his ability to maintain adductor integrity. So as a starting regression point, you would have your leg as close up to the bench as you can, and then slowly work your way out to a point that you've got the ankles at the end. We just want you guys to isometrically hold it in this position, but there is variations where you're moving your leg up and down or bringing your knee up and down as if you're doing an A-based pattern. The last movement pattern that we typically work with would be some sort of dead bug variation. We've already got that in the upper body based stuff, so we're not going to go over that again.
Hi everyone, in this video we're going to go over our upper body weight stability exercises. So first we're going to have David do some I's, Y's, and T's. So you're going to have a bench, you're going to be set up on a bench, and essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to mimic the shape of the letter that the exercise starts with. So for example, we have our I's where he's moving up and down throughout the shoulder range, trying to move those scaps, okay? And then he's going to go into a Y, set up a little bit wider, trying to mimic that Y form, and then finally a T, where the arms are going to be straight out to the side, using the band to create tension, okay? Trying to move those scaps throughout the entire range of motion, Exactly. Okay. And next we're going to have him do a push-up plus. Okay, so he's going to set up in a high plank position or the top of a push-up. And from here he's going to protract or retract, okay, until the scaps are touching, and then he's going to protract, trying to create a rounded upper draft, trying to really push those scaps away from the body. Okay, next we're going to have him set up in a face pull position. So you need a band again, and you're going to set up with it straight out in front of you, and then you're going to pull the band apart, bring the scaps back throughout the entire range of motion. Okay. And then finally we're going to do some horizontal and vertical scap setting. So for your vertical scap setting, you're going to need the band in a high position. You're going to get down onto your knees, and then you're going to make sure that the rib cage is down and tucked throughout the entire range, and you're going to bring the scaps down and together, trying to only move from the scaps, not bending the arms. Okay, so he's going to bring them down. Yeah, exactly. And then we'll have you set up for the horizontal scap setting. So exact same as the vertical, except you're now moving the scaps forward and backwards, really trying to pinch those scaps together and really keeping those arms straight so it's all coming from the scaps. Hi everybody, in this video we're going to go over our lower body bodyweight stability exercises. So the first exercise that we're going to go through is a single leg RDL. So we're going to have, yeah, exactly, and we're going to have them set up on one leg, and you are essentially performing what would be the exact same as a double leg RDL, but with the added stability of having a balance on one leg, going to the edge of that hamstring range of motion, and then coming back up. Next we're going to be doing something called a hip airplane. So he's going to set up on a single leg again, taking the shoes off, because you are trying to maintain a strong arch throughout the entire movement. It's going to move back into that single leg hinge position, and then from here, he's going to open up at the hip. So it is tough to balance in this exercise. So, yeah. Okay. And you are trying to bring that leg around, opening up at the hip. Okay. Next thing we're going to have David do is set up in a rear foot elevated split squat. So we're going to need the bench for this. We're going to have him set up with his back leg up on the bench. And then he's going to descend, sinking through that stretch in the hip flexor, and then using the glutes and hamstrings to drive through the movement. Okay. And then we'll have David set up with the band around the knees. We're going to move into a banded squat and band wink. Okay, so first with the band squat, all you're trying to do is maintain alignment of the knees over the toes as you move through the squats. Okay, so you're trying to fight that band tension on the way down. And then in our band wink, he's sinking to the bottom of the squat, or actually it's more of a quarter squat, and then from there he's moving the knee into internal rotation and then back externally rotating as far as he can, trying to use the glutes to initiate that movement. And then our final exercise is going to be our glute bridge or hip thrust. So if you've got a bench, feel free to do it on a bench. So you set up with the scaps on the bench, and then you're going to lift the toes ever so slightly, drive through the heels, squeezing the glutes out the way up. So you're using the glutes to initiate the movement and really squeezing at the top, trying to get them activated. And then we'll have them go onto the ground and perform a few hip thrusts on the ground as well if you don't have access to a bench. Okay. Same thing, he's going to lift the toes a little bit and then really initiate the movement with the glutes, squeezing isometrically at the top.
Okay, so from here we're going to go into our loaded stability-based movements for the upper body. Typically you want to work at towards the GH and a little bit of the elbow, just through extension of the movement patterns that you're going to be working through. So we're going to have Sean start with a kettlebell stability press. So he's going to be holding the kettlebell upside down, and then from that position, as he's pressing up, he's going to try to maintain that retraction throughout the entire movement. As he gets up to the top, he's going to slowly allow a slight protraction of his scaps. And as he's coming up, he's maintaining that 90-degree position and that internal position of his shoulder as he's pressing. And then when he reaches up to the top, he does rotate out slightly. From there, we're going to go into windmills. So if you have a light kettlebell, you can use that as your option. Otherwise, use very light dumbbells. So when I'm saying light, in between like 2.5, 5 to at most like 8 pounds. And as you're doing this movement pattern, what you're hoping to do is maintain external rotation of the shoulder blades staying retracted and pinched together, and then having a slight rotation from the torso as you're coming down. So you'll notice that as he hits this end range, his hand here is lined up with his hand at the bottom. Everything stays nice and tight, and then he returns back down to the bottom, restarting the movement pattern again. Typically like 4 or 5 reps on each side. From here, we're going to go into our lower body-based movements, which is basically variations of RDLs and counterbalance-based movements. So to start, we're going to start with a offset RDL. So we'll have him use the same kettlebell here. And what he's going to do is have it in the opposite arm to leg, doing a single leg RDL. So just like the bodyweight version that we previously showed you guys, you're going to be loading the glutes as best as you can and returning back up the top. You can allow the load to travel a little bit forward in front of you. This will challenge you in terms of stability, but if stability is an issue, keep the load nice and close to your body. To progress that further, we can go into same arm, same leg variations, and the same general premise applies. Further the weight away, the harder it is. But you want to make sure that as you're coming down, the hips are staying square. You're not just twisting one out to the opposite side. So you're still loading that glute as best as you can, but the opposite leg needs to be able to make sure that the hips are able to stay square. From there, we're going to go into some counterbalance-based movements. And what we've got is a counterbalance squat and a counterbalance lunge. So counterbalance generally means that the weight's just straight out in front of you. So we're going to start with a counterbalance squat. So weight straight out in front, and Sean's going to squat down, focusing on all the general movement patterns that apply to your squat. Looking for flexion of the hip, knees, and strong support from the ankles. From here, we're going to go into a counterbalance lunge. So typically I ask for a slightly larger stance for people when they're doing their lunges so that they can load their hips and get a little bit deeper into it without sacrificing their knee position. So I'll have Sean go ahead here, weight out in front. Notice that the kickstand leg or the leg not being loaded stays straight. And that as he's coming down, he's not getting extra range of motion just from his chest collapsing. Everything's coming from loading that hip and letting the knee stay aligned with his ankle. And that is basically our loaded stability-based movements that we would have people generally do. If for whatever reason you've got your own sort of ways to break down, we would progress further. From there, we're going into empty bar-based work and getting into the fun stuff. All right, ladies and gentlemen, stay strong. Let us know if you have any questions. Let's get huge.